Hey, well, hello if you're watching on YouTube. I'm here with Gavin Konop, who is the director of Spider-Man Lotus, and it's a fan film that is non-profit, and it's well, in my opinion, I think it's a gift to all Spider-Man fans, and you should go watch the trailers and follow Gavin and all the cast members and see what they're up to.
Thank you.
And it's all looking very incredible. So it's an honor to be able to talk to you today. How are you
Yeah, thanks for
doing?
I'm doing good. Just kind of dealing with the amount of attention the movie got this week. Obviously
Yeah.
like we dropped a lot of reveals. We dropped the trailer, Green Goblin, the new
Mhm.
suits and everything like that. So I'm just kind of trying to process the reaction and everything like that. So it's been a pretty crazy week for sure.
Yeah, I can imagine because I follow you on Instagram, so I've seen all your posts about your dad meeting Andrew Garfield, which is amazing. Like,
Man.
I would probably cry, to be honest.
Yeah, I was crying. I was like, I can't believe it. I couldn't even sleep or anything like that.
Yeah, so it's very exciting. It's great that everyone's obviously looking forward to it. And yeah, like it's just incredible because this is the first time I'm seeing so much like potential in a fan film. So I think the work that you, the rest of the crew and the cast have done is just top notch. So
Thank you, I appreciate that.
yeah, so I'm really, really excited to see the film when it actually releases. So
Of course.
yeah, so I guess we can segue into the questions. So I guess we'll start off with, because the film is about Spider-Man, and he's obviously a very globally known character, very well beloved. Lots of people love him, including myself. And I just wanted to know, what are your like personal experiences with the character, like growing up?
Right. So I can't remember a time when I wasn't obsessed with Spider-Man, because I think he's been a part of my life for as long as I can remember. But according to my mom, my first exposure to him, I was about 2 or 3 years old. And she was flipping through the TV channels, and the first Sam Raimi Spider-Man movie was playing on the TV. This must have been, 2004, 2005. And I immediately became attached to the movie. Maybe it was the bright colors of the Spider-Man suit, or just the spectacle of the action. But I immediately became attached and drawn to what I was seeing on the screen. And she said I couldn't take my eyes off it. And from that day forward, I was getting Spider-Man costumes, Spider-Man toys, Spider-Man themed birthday parties, all the Spider-Man games, all the shows, everything, like everything you can think of. I became immediately obsessed with. And throughout elementary school, throughout middle school, when it wasn't entirely cool to like Spider-Man, generally people looked down on you if you were into comic books and stuff like that.
Mhm.
um, I still felt satisfied in my life because of the fact that I had Spider-Man to kind of care about and draw pictures of and make films about whenever I got an iPod or an iPhone. um, and he just sort of the character was there for me when I didn't have that many friends. He was able to give me something to look forward to all the time. With both Amazing Spider-Man movies, I was able to constantly look forward to the next thing and look forward to it. And you know, I had this game called Little Big Planet where I would make
Oh,
Spider-Man
thanks.
stuff on. So yeah, that and I've just he guided me through a lot of my life, and I owe a lot of who I am and a lot of what I believe in to that character, even though it's just a fictional character. He's been so influential to my life and just bled into a lot of who I am.
Yeah, no, I can definitely empathize with all of that because I've been a fan of the character maybe since 2004 as well, I think, when Spider-Man 2 came out. So yeah, and like it's always been a bit of a comfort character for me, and
Yeah,
basically sort of opened my mind to being more creative and imaginative for
yeah.
sure.
I owe everything to him for
Mhm.
everything I am. So
Yeah, that's that's heartwarming.
thank you.
um, so moving on to more of the films and media, I suppose. A lot of critics and audiences collectively agree that certain films, video games, and shows are like the best adaptations of the character, like Spider-Man 2, The Amazing Spider-Man, or Spectacular Spider-Man, and then
Yeah.
Insomniac Spider-Man as well. So I was wondering if you perhaps hold like a belief that there's a right or wrong way to adapt the character.
That's a good question, actually. So when it comes to adapting Spider-Man, of course, I have my interpretation of the character, and I have my
Mhm.
specific, idea of what the character should be. But I think with any piece of media in fiction, anybody who looks at a piece of media and interprets it, everybody's going to take something differently away from it. And that goes beyond comic books. It goes into books and movies and TV shows and poems and any sort of literature. You're going to everybody's going to have a different reaction, different interpretation of what they're looking at.
Mhm.
So I don't think that there ever will be a valid, a quote unquote right way to adapt Spider-Man. I think that I have in my own mind the ideal Spider-Man. I have my idea of what Spider-Man should be, but I don't think I have the right to tell anybody that they're right or wrong about how they're seeing the character. And I might disagree with certain interpretations, and I can I can debate on the merit of their arguments, and we can talk about what works for the character, what might not work for the character. And of course, as a big fan of the character, I'm very particular in how I see him, so it
Mm.
can lead to very particular arguments, and we can agree and disagree on whatever it may come to. But I think like to answer your question overall, I don't think there's a right or wrong way to interpret him. I think we can agree or disagree on how to interpret him.
Mm. Yeah, no, that's definitely, I would probably think that as well. Because most of the time these conversations around like the best adaptations have always been about whether they're comic accurate, whether the performances are great, whether it like, like it really captures the essence of like Peter Parker and Spider-Man.
Yeah,
And I know like a lot of people talk about how like the MCU films aren't that great, or the Amazing Spider-Man isn't that great, and some people don't like the trilogy either. But I guess
yeah,
like again, I think what you mentioned about people having like their own sort of interpretations of the character, like makes it or breaks it for you, I guess. And then you gotta like just respect
yeah.
everyone's opinions, really.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
everybody's got different standards for the character. Some people might have it way up here, and some people might have it, down here. It
Mhm.
depends on the person. So
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so with that in mind, do you have any personal favorites, like adaptations of Spider-Man, and why, I guess?
yeah. So my favorite adaptation of Spider-Man ever made is Spider-Man 2. And not even the Raimi trilogy as a whole, but Spider-Man 2 in particular, is such a phenomenal adaptation of the comics, but not because of how accurate it is, because it's not entirely 100% a direct adaptation, which I would never want. I would never want a translation of the comics.
Mhm.
Um, so what Spider-Man 2 does is it takes the classic comics that Stan Lee and Steve Ditko wrote, and of course, decades and decades of comics, and it creates a story that is honorary to who the character is.
Mhm.
It very much deconstructs the character of Spider-Man, understands Peter Parker's inability to uphold his responsibility and his personal desires. And of course, that's such a massive part of the character is balance, is trying to um, find where the line is between a duty to the world and our own what we would like to pursue. And that's perfectly encapsulated in Spider-Man 2 with not only Peter Parker but also Doc Ock and MJ and Aunt May. Every character kind of feels like they're connected in one story that is all about a hero in all of us, and giving up the things we want the most, even if it's our dreams.
Mhm.
And then eventually realizing, we don't have to push away our dreams in order to pursue a responsible life, or pursue an obligation. Um, so I think that each character in that movie is very nuanced. The movie's presented in a very mature way, even though there are campy moments. They're
Mhm.
charming. They're presented in a charming way. So I think, of course, Spectacular Spider-Man and the animated series from the 90s and Insomniac Spider-Man, they might be closer to the comic books in terms of accuracy and direct translation. But I think
Mm.
Spider-Man 2 is the ideal way to adapt the character in a meaningful and important way.
Mhm. Yeah. Spider-Man 2 is my favorite one as well, actually.
Yeah.
It was the first one I ever came across, and it's like from a filmmaking perspective and just understanding character and drama, it was just immaculate. And
It's
I haven't
perfect.
had that experience with any other Spider-Man film or
Yeah.
show
I
since.
mean, I just watched it last night again for like
Yeah.
probably the 200th time.
Yeah.
I'm just constantly impressed by it. The writing, the way that Sam Raimi portrays human emotion, and the way every
Mhm.
shot is framed to make you feel personally attached to the characters. It was all very inspiring for Lotus. So I
Mhm.
think this movie is perfect. Like I wouldn't change anything about it.
Yeah, yeah. Like I see it as a bit of an artistic film at times as well, just
Yeah,
from the way it's shot, but also how it uses the cinematography as well to sort of show characters' emotions and what's going on in the scene. And
yeah, absolutely.
um, I think I'm not sure if it was High Top Films or somebody else in their video essay. I think something that they mentioned that stuck with me about the movie as well is that it doesn't just focus on Spider-Man, it focuses on the man behind the mask because he's just as important.
Mhm.
And
I mean, yeah, you've got a whole second act where there's no Spider-Man at all. It's purely Peter Parker.
mm,
And man, I don't think we would ever get a Spider-Man adaptation like that today, where you remove the Spider-Man costume entirely for an entire portion of the story.
mhm,
I think it's such a risky thing that they did. But
yeah,
I think Spider-Man 2 was made at the perfect time when superhero movies were just becoming popular, but they weren't a giant marketing, um, just ability for studios to market the crap out of it.
mhm,
Um, it was just made in the perfect time, and they were able to do exactly what they needed to do. And it's lightning in a bottle. It's a perfect storm. And I think it was. I don't think it could have been made if it didn't have the same team, the same writers, same director. It's just the perfect storm of talent.
mhm. Yeah, I agree. And I also think as well that Spider-Man 2 in a way is also ahead of its time
Yeah,
as well because we see superhero movies as just being these long franchises with so many films building a cinematic universe that I personally feel like it kind of takes the attention away from trying to focus on characters,
yeah,
like having
yeah.
a
And like
character driven story.
yeah, and like I'm obviously a massive fan of just studying character. I
Mm,
enjoy references to a bigger universe, and I think the MCU is perfectly respectable.
mhm,
And I have nothing but respect for them for being able to do that, because like literally the most massive franchise of all time. And it
mhm,
it started, it started so humbly with Kevin Feige being just a fan of the characters, and he was able to build such a huge universe. But I think in many ways, I think the connected universe can get in the way sometimes with studying character, and it can oftentimes be a restriction, which is why I'm excited for the Batman, which is
mhm,
it's not connected to any sort of universe. It's a completely contained world that Matt Reeves is building, and he has the full freedom to do whatever he'd like with the characters. So I think the Batman is very refreshing in comparison to modern superhero content.
mhm. Yeah, I saw the trailer a few weeks ago and was really excited to see how
Yeah.
grounded it is. So it's like a
Absolutely.
throwback to how superhero movies kind of were before the cinematic universe is kicked off, I suppose.
Yeah,
So
it's
yeah,
very exciting.
yeah, great. So you say that Spider-Man 2 is obviously a big inspiration for Lotus, and I could actually pick that up from watching the official trailer.
Yeah.
Um, what would you say is sort of like the quote unquote spark that made you want to make this movie?
Yeah. Funny enough, I would say the spark didn't come from watching another movie or watching another TV show.
Mm,
It came from real life, discovering sort of a real life discovery that I learned throughout high school. is that
Right.
oftentimes when a tragedy happens, or something unfortunate happens to you and you're down in the dumps or you're depressed or anything like that, you learn a lot more about yourself and grow more than you would when you're in an optimistic sort of lifestyle. Um, so there was moments in high school where I was very much, I wouldn't say I was depressed, but very unmotivated about life, and I would encounter something that would kind of put me in a darker place. And I discovered, coming out of those dark places, that I had changed a lot during those moments, and I had learned a lot during those moments.
Mm.
And they sort of shaped who I was. And when I found that perspective of, you know, sort of appreciating sadness and appreciating despair, um, because of the fact their ability to change you, that's when I started thinking about what I could do with storytelling, and its power to change people, and its power to show people that same perspective that I learned, and teach the same lesson that I had learned on my own, through my own experiences. So,
Mhm.
I made this Lotus story as, there's a lot of personal um, lessons that I ingrained into it, and that I'm hoping can be conveyed to people.
Mhm.
I hope that people can be inspired by it. And sort of, the story is made to, help anyone who maybe is going through loss or going through a tragedy, and help them understand that it's something to sort of appreciate in the end, that we have sadness to uplift the more optimistic times in our life, or more uplifting times in our life. They're enhanced because of the sadness and because of the despair. So with this story, of course, with Gwen's death, we've
Mhm.
got Peter, Harry, and MJ all hit by this tragedy, and this is where the Lotus comes in, and they're all trying to sort of grow from this tragedy and this turmoil. And in the moment, they may not understand how much they're changing and growing as people. But throughout the story, you sort of see that they're um, learning a lot about themselves that they were previously afraid to confront, or previously afraid to overcome. And I think that the script turned out exactly how I wanted it, and I think
Mm.
that hopefully the ideas will be conveyed in a way that I hope they will be.
Mhm. Yeah. So there's like a piece of your heart that's in this, embedded deep into this
Yeah,
film.
yeah, and
Yeah.
yeah, I think my biggest inspiration would be, my own philosophy that I learned over high school, and that's kind of what became ingrained in the script naturally.
Mm. Yeah. So it sounds like this is also, going to be a very character different driven, sorry, story, and kind of like what we talked about a bit earlier about Spider-Man 2, focusing on the man behind the mask and the people around him more so than the actual superhero itself. So that'll be very exciting to see.
Yeah, there's a
And
lot of Peter Parker in the movie,
yeah.
and a lot of Spider-Man in the costume doing things that normal people would do, which
Mhm.
I think I like watching over the footage of Spider-Man just walking through a graveyard, or Spider-Man just
Mhm.
talking to someone's mother in a hallway. I think there's a lot of merit to that we don't usually see in previous Spider-Man movies. Normally the mask is taken off,
Mm.
but here, he's fully costumed, just walking through a graveyard. Um, and that's something I've wanted to see for a long time. It's in the comics a lot, and seeing Spider-Man do these human things kind of sets it apart, and I really enjoy watching the footage just as a fan.
Okay. Yeah. Because I remember the graveyard shot in the trailer, and
Yeah,
I didn't think we've seen much of that in any live action
yeah,
adaptations, I think. So yeah,
yeah.
that'll
And
be
it's very
interesting.
prevalent in the comics. Of Spider-Man just
Yeah.
going to visit graves in his suit, fully costumed and everything.
Mm.
So it was great to bring to life as a fan of the character.
Mhm. Okay. So that's your like personal choices to make Lotus like your film.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Because obviously I grew up with the comics and everything. The death of Gwen Stacy was one of the first comics I read back in third grade. Before that, was only about the TV shows and movies. But I started, reading the classic comics back in third grade, fourth grade, and the death of Gwen Stacy, that became my Spider-Man. The way it was drawn, the way it was illustrated, the way the character was presented, that became how I saw the character.
Mhm.
Um, and of course, being able to do a Spider-Man movie and being able to translate some of the things that I found appealing about the comics into reality, like Spider-Man walking through a graveyard, like Amazing Spider-Man 181, one of my favorite comics, um, was a great opportunity to have and to finally see this on screen that I've wanted to see for so long.
Mhm. Yeah. Like, I know I'm aware that obviously the issues that deal with Gwen's death
Yeah,
were a pivotal moment in like the silver age of comic books, because the thought of a hero losing his love interest
yeah,
isn't an everyday like thing. So um but in with that being said, I think almost in a way like her story, even as she dies, like it's still like impactful in how it allows
yeah.
the characters to grow and understand more of who they are.
I mean, it's such a definitive moment in Spider-Man's life, and it's such
Mhm.
a pivotal Spider-Man story. And it really builds the blocks for what a Spider-Man story should be. You've got the Green Goblin, Spider-Man's greatest enemy. You've
Mhm.
got you've got Peter Parker, Harry Osborn, Aunt Mary Jane, and Gwen all in college with each other. And you've got the classic Spider-Man suit. And you've got the whole story with her dying on the bridge. It feels to me like the foundations of all Spider-Man stories to come, and it feels like kind of the
Mhm.
pinnacle of how a Spider-Man story should be told.
Mhm. Yeah. So it's like it's an iconic, point in his
Yeah.
life, but filled with tragedy.
Yeah, and it's like, I think, probably my favorite Spider-Man story of all time, even though Child Within by J.M. DeMatteis and the Spectacular Spider-Man run, and
Mhm.
obviously Kraven's Last Hunt are some of the most well-written Spider-Man comics of all time. I don't know if if you've read them before, but they're just so well written. They're so nuanced and in depth. And I love those stories. But Death of Gwen Stacy, I've got a nostalgic attachment to, and I feel like it's so peak Spider-Man, that I have to just call that the my favorite above all for sure.
Okay. Yeah. My comic book collection is very small at the moment because there aren't many stores around here where I live. But I do have a few issues of Ultimate Spider-Man, and I hope to collect more.
Yeah, I say
Yeah.
if you were looking for any sort of Spider-Man comics, Kraven's Last Hunt
Mhm.
is def. I mean, if you're a Spider-Man 2 fan or anything like that, I think you'd really like Kraven's Last Hunt for sure.
Okay, I'll add that to my list. Yeah, so on the line of comic storylines, so you've mentioned the night Gwen Stacy died as being one main inspiration for Lotus.
Yeah,
Um, are there any other storylines and other general comic books that you like that have impacted the film or you as a filmmaker?
yeah. So there are quite a few stories. There's this story called The Kiss from Web Spinners of Tales of Spider-Man first issue, the very back end of the book. It's a story about Peter and Gwen. I don't Was it the night before she died? It was soon before she died. It's a story about Peter and Gwen before that happened. Um, and it was a huge inspiration for me. It was written by J.M. DeMatteis, my favorite Spider-Man writer.
Mhm.
Um, of course, Amazing Spider-Man 181, when Peter Parker visits the grave of Uncle Ben. It's a massive inspiration for just Peter Parker's character in general.
Mhm.
The entire story from 121 up to I think 135 of the aftermath of Gwen's death was of course an inspiration. Spider-Man Blue, the graphic novel, which kind of provides a more modern lens on the classic comics of Peter and Gwen and their relationship and sort of that college era. Spider-Man Blue sort of modernizes those stories into our world, and that was a big inspiration for me, without a doubt. And really, just any comic I've read of Spider-Man that I've picked up on, any sort of new traits that I've found in certain comics, like throughout the
Mhm.
Spectacular Spider-Man run, throughout Web of Spider-Man, any sort of comic that appealed to me in Peter's character, I think subconsciously became ingrained in how I wrote Spider-Man and how I was inspired for the movie. Um, so really, a lot of the classic books by Tom DeFalco, Ron Friend is the artist, but Stan Lee, James and Matthias, goes on and on and on. All the classic writers, I think, were just a massive inspiration to me throughout, whether subconsciously or consciously.
Mm-hmm. I feel like that sort of inspiration really shines through from what we've seen so far of Lotus.
Yeah, I mean,
There's like,
and even down to the visuals, I've tried to make
mhm,
it look like a kind of a vibrant looking comic book, like Harry in Times Square. I didn't like how the teaser shot looked. It was very gray and
mhm,
very desaturated. So I was like, okay, I think we need to add a lot more color to this movie. I don't like it looking so gray and dull.
mhm,
I didn't like how the teaser turned out. I don't think it's a good representation of the movie. But the trailer, I think the grading is a lot more in line with how I wanted the movie to look, like a moving comic book.
mhm,
It's how I wanted the visual to kind of represent. So, I like sort of having these vibrant colors that aren't too saturated. They're not too colorful, but they're you can in many ways you can feel like you're watching a moving comic book.
mhm. Yeah, I can see that. And one thought I had as well was that the color grading reminded me a bit of like the warm tones of like Sam Raimi's
Yeah.
Spider-Man.
Yeah, of course I love the color grading of Spider-Man 2.
Mhm,
I think that coloring is perfect for the character of Spider-Man. Um, I think the movie's colored so beautifully. Um, and I also, just to add real quick, I think the
mhm,
first Amazing Spider-Man, the tone of that movie is the ideal Spider-Man tone in terms of how the character should be presented. So I
mhm,
think if you take the tone of Amazing Spider-Man, the visual of Amazing Spider-Man, and you merge it with the coloring of the Raimi films, and the atmosphere of the Raimi films, I think you've got the ideal Spider-Man tone, and that's
mhm,
kind of what we tried to do for Lotus.
mhm. I think I can see the Amazing Spider-Man influences as well when
Mhm.
watching the official trailer.
Yeah, I think we tried our best to kind of take inspiration from those, but also take inspiration from Mark Webb in general. Like 500 Days of Summer
Mhm,
was a big inspiration in terms of visual and sort of just an approach to love. So
mhm,
yeah, I think a lot of those inspirations can be pretty prevalent in just the trailer alone.
mhm. Yeah. I actually watched 500 Days of Summer the other day.
Yeah, it's such a great movie. I love that movie.
Yeah. It was good.
Yeah, in
Yeah.
my top four for sure.
Yeah. Um, so we've talked about influences for Lotus. Um, I guess now we will talk about maybe more of the filmmaking process as well.
Yeah.
So, is there anything you've learned from the principal photography stage or currently now in the post-production phase of the film?
Yeah. I learned so much because of the fact that I ran straight into making a feature film for my first movie. I've only the only like short film I've made was back in middle school. It never even got finished. It was shot on an iPhone and everything. And of course, throughout my high school, I did videos for the school and we did skits and stuff like that, but
Mhm,
I'd never done a movie before.
mhm,
Um, so I think, like, I don't regret it at all. I'm glad that I rushed straight into making a feature film because of the fact that I had to adapt so fast and learn so much. And of course,
mhm,
I became more stressed than I ever have in my entire life.
mhm,
And I lost so much sleep. There are pictures of me on my Instagram where I've just got super dark circles in my eyes. I've got all this gross facial hair. Hair's grown out terribly. And like I don't regret it though. I'm glad that I had to sort of deal with all of that stress and having to try to organize everything and keep everything on track. I'm grateful for it.
mhm,
But I don't know if there's any one thing I can name that I learned, because I really learned everything I could about directing. Every single
mhm,
aspect I improved in by the end. I went in sort of very unconfident and sort of not trusting my abilities, and I was always asking Tristan, "Do you think we should get this shot, or do you think we should get this angle?" And I was like, kind of, not entirely on board with my own decisions. I wasn't fully
mhm,
confident in what I was able to do. So by the end of the shoot, as I learned more and progressed more, by the end, I was saying, okay, we're gonna get this shot, we're gonna get this shot, we're gonna get this angle. I just became a lot more sort of I guess I understood leadership a little bit more because obviously as a director, you're leading
mhm,
everybody else and they're all looking to you for guidance on the movie because you're sort of you're in control of everything that's happening on set. So
Mhm.
I think by the end, I sort of learned to embrace that role of leading people and trying to keep everybody confident in the movie and keep everybody in high spirits and make sure everybody's on good terms with each other. And if there's any drama on set, you want to be able to deal with it in a way that
Mhm.
doesn't break ties with anybody, and you want to make sure um, everybody's on good terms, and you don't want to make sure, especially you as the director, don't get involved in drama.
Mhm.
You want to make sure you're kind of always on the outside of it, and you're still dealing with it, but without taking any sides, and you're trying to be kind of respectful to everybody and everything like that. But yeah, I mean, I think I fundamentally changed as a person over the summer making the movie, and I
Mhm.
wouldn't trade it for a second.
Yeah, like I can tell that you've worked very, very hard, and it really does show.
Thank you.
Like everything so far is impressive and exciting. So, like I can see that you're a very talented person. Like
I
it was
appreciate
brave
that.
to obviously jump into like filmmaking straight away, but
Yeah.
again, I think you've done a really, really good job.
Thank you. Really appreciate it. And I'm glad that that shows because if it didn't turn out good, then I don't know what I would do with myself because I dedicated
Mm,
so much of my
no,
life to the movie. So
yeah, like I mean that's admirable because you clearly have a passion for the character and telling a story
yeah,
with
of
him.
course.
So,
And I'm glad.
that
I'm so glad it's turned out how it has. For sure.
yeah. Because I know for me, like I've had like ideas for films and TV shows, but it's very hard for me to sort of take those first steps, I
Yeah.
guess.
I think making the jump is the scariest part because you don't. I mean, I remember not knowing what was gonna happen. I was like, we're gonna go film in New York, and like, what? How are we gonna do
Mm-hmm.
this? Like, I was very like intimidated by the. I mean, I'd never been in New York before,
Mm-hmm.
so I had like no idea where I was going, and I totally get not wanting to take those first steps because it's so intimidating, and it's like what like you're sort of in the dark and you're very confused about where to go or what to do
Mm-hmm.
because there's no like rule book for filmmaking. There's no definitive path to go on. There's so many different avenues. So you're sort of flying blind for a while, and you're just hoping something sticks, and you're hoping it works. But it's very, very risky and intimidating career choice without a doubt.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So obviously, making this film has just been a journey, I guess. Like not just with the film itself, but for yourself as a person and as a director.
Yeah, I think yeah, it changed me as a human being. Not just as a director or filmmaker, but I think just
Mm.
from before I left to do the movie and after I got back from doing the movie, I feel like a lot of my mindset changed, a lot of how I present myself changed. I don't feel like I'm the same as I was, and I graduated high school and then I came back and I'm just such a different person now, and I'm so appreciative of what it taught me and what I learned from it.
Mhm. Yeah, so I suppose from here on, like you feel more confident in being a director for a film
Yeah.
and
I feel a little more confident in my abilities. I
mhm,
obviously so much to learn,
mhm,
but I feel like I'm finally kind of beyond the initial jump, and I'm ready to kind of get into more complex things and things that might be more difficult. We're getting ready to shoot a bunch of fight scenes in additional photography for the movie.
mm,
And I feel prepared to do that now because I did a lot of the drama stuff over the summer, and the general core of the movie's done.
right. Yeah, so it's a continuous process
Yeah. Yeah.
in this
Constantly
particular
learning, and
career.
I think even when some of the best directors of all time have something to learn,
Mhm,
and they're never going to be perfect, and you should always be looking for, how can I improve this? How can I improve that? Never look back on your work and hate it,
mm,
and sort of well, I mean, I'm sort of a hypocrite saying that because I've talked so bad about the teaser trailer, but generally speaking, you probably shouldn't look back on your career with sort of hatred or sort of regret. I think that would make for sort of a lifestyle that isn't very fulfilling. But
mhm,
kind of always look back on your work and think how it could have been improved or how you could have changed it, and try to learn from there and continue developing over time. And I think it makes for a pretty fulfilling life, I think.
Yeah, because it's a very sort of mature mindset to have, and it's the only way I suppose that you can really grow.
Yeah, never, acknowledging that you're never going to be perfect, and
Mhm,
also acknowledging that you can still appreciate your work without it being perfect. There's sort of a
mhm,
middle ground there that I think is sort of the best mindset to follow.
mhm. Great, yeah, I agree. So, being able to make this film itself, it's an incredible accomplishment, but also with the people that you get to work with. So, what was it like working with, the cast and crew who are also, they share this
Yeah.
passion and love for comic books
I
and
think
Spider-Man?
it made the process of making a feature film a lot less intimidating because of the
Mhm,
fact that we were all doing it out of love. No one was doing it for the money.
mhm,
Everybody was doing it because they care about the characters and everything. So, when I would make a mistake on set, or when anybody would make a mistake on set, it didn't feel as intimidating or embarrassing to the rest of the cast and crew because of the
mhm,
fact that they understood it was my, not only did they understand it was my first movie, but also they were all sort of very involved in the creative process, and they were very involved in making sure that the movie
mhm,
turns out being a good movie in general. So I felt very comfortable being a director on set, and making mistakes, and sort of not always making the right calls, and learning from that.
mhm,
They made it a very comfortable work environment, and I'm very appreciative of the fact that they were respectful to me, and they understood the vision, and they understood what I wanted to portray with the movie. Um, and I wouldn't change, like I always say, I wouldn't change the experience for anything. I'm so glad it
mhm,
happened, and I'm grateful for all the problems we encountered, and all the obstacles we had to face. I think they
mhm,
they benefited me, and they benefited the movie as a whole. And I appreciate them regardless of the stress that they may have caused me, at the time.
mhm. Yeah, so it's, having like-minded individuals
Yeah,
around you as you create something is, obviously, yeah, I can imagine it being a lot of a comfortable, safer
yeah,
environment to work in. And you know that because everyone's passionate, that the project will turn out great because everyone's putting their 100%
yeah.
into it.
Every actor, every actress was so willing to accept my direction, and so willing to accept you know um in being embodying the performance that I expected and wanted from them, because I knew they're so talented,
Mhm,
that they could pull off a performance that can be believable, and can be related to by people. And because of course, you're if you're doing a drama movie, you're doing an emotional movie, the
mhm,
acting and performances sell the entire movie. They can make or break it. And I think I honestly think every single character um absolutely nailed it, and they did exactly what they needed to do.
mhm,
um and perfectly embodied the script, and perfectly portrayed it in the way that I imagined it. Mariah, Sean, Warden, Tuin, they did such a fantastic job. Even
mhm,
Max's mom, they're just so good at selling the emotion and selling the characters that I really couldn't ask for any better.
mhm. Yeah, I mean, from watching the trailers and all, like, it just felt like, we were seeing seeing the actual characters come to life pretty much, so
Yeah, it's
I could
such
see how much they embodied them.
Yeah, I mean, the way everything's come together is so absolutely beyond me to think. Sean, especially, the way he looks like Harry Osborn from the
Mhm,
comics.
mhm,
He's literally the reason why the project started. When I was reading a Harry Osborn comic, and I came back to Instagram, and I saw him, I'm like, I could not believe it. I was double taking, and I'm like, whoa.
mhm,
So just the way not only they physically embody the characters, but even on screen, they are exactly how I imagine the characters being in real life. So
mhm.
forever grateful for all of them.
Yeah, and I also noticed as well, like, I picked up some references from both the teaser and the official trailer about, like, with Harry and his sort of, like, drug addiction, and MJ, like, getting into smoking. These are, like, little things that I've read about, and, like, it's
Yeah,
nice to see that, like,
yeah.
and,
I
like,
think
being
there's only been
perfectly
like
portrayed.
yeah, there's only been like one Harry adaptation that just tried to tackle the drug addiction. spectacular Spider-Man, but they had to
Hmm.
water it down for kids. It could never be explored in a more
Yeah.
mature way. So it feels very good to show the side of Harry that I've been wanting to see for such a long time, and the side of Harry that really goes to the core of who his character is. And I want to show people why he's one of my favorite Spider-Man characters of all time.
Mhm.
I'm very excited for people to see that.
Yeah, and I'm sure Sean will deliver because just from like
Absolutely.
the little bits in the trailer, like I was still just very impressed.
Yeah, he's fantastic.
Yeah. So we've talked about the film quite a bit now, and obviously, like it's still in the post-production stage,
Yeah.
and it's set to release summer next year, right?
Hmm.
Yeah. So obviously the film is highly anticipated, and like it makes sense because it's very good. um, what do you think the potential impact would be on aspiring filmmakers and actors once Lotus releases?
I think a lot of I've gotten a lot of messages from people about how they feel inspired by Lotus because of the fact that I'm a first-time filmmaker and I never made a movie before,
Hmm.
and I was able to do this as my first movie. Get a movie funded almost $80,000 now,
Hmm.
for the first thing I've ever made. So I think people seeing that and seeing the fact that not because of me but because of my crew, that it has become such a high quality looking film. And of course, it's not perfect. We've all got room to improve, but
Hmm.
um, I think I look at the shots that Tristan got, and I think Tristan, you got these shots that look like a movie. And he's always kind of undervaluing himself or underselling himself, and
Hmm.
beating himself up. But he got such great cinematography, and I'm forever appreciative of him. But regardless, for people to see a fan film that kind of reaches a quality level that can look like a movie, especially because of them. Um, I think that they can feel a little bit inspired to think they don't have to be in Hollywood to make a movie
Hmm.
that they're passionate about. Because I remember back in middle school, I was very intimidated by the fact that there were so many big Hollywood movies, and I thought, well, how am I going to get to this point? Because obviously I've always wanted to make movies, but I thought that I had to become famous to make a movie.
Hmm.
Eventually, of course, I came to realize you don't need to be a public eye name to make a movie. You don't have to be famous to make a story. So
Hmm.
I'm hoping that Lotus, in addition to the moral messages that I can hopefully inspire,
Hmm.
the actual filmmaking practicality messages, I hope that people are able to pick up on the fact that we're entering an age where we can make our own films, and we can put our all into it, and we don't need to become household names in Hollywood to tell a story that we care about.
Hmm.
So I think that's sort of something people can take away from it. And of course, it's not easy. It took a lot of work, a lot of effort. You have to be willing to make a lot of sacrifices in your life to do this. Um, but I think it shows the possibility that it can happen, regardless of the amount of work it takes and regardless of the amount that you have to put on the line.
Hmm.
But I'm hoping people, and a lot of people have, seen that they are capable of this. Anybody's capable of making Lotus.
Hmm.
So I hope that people sort of understand that and pick that up from the movie.
Hmm. Yeah, because I suppose with the like superhero fan media as well, like maybe people might assume it's very ambitious
Mhm.
because they need to show the characters like fighting or like
Yeah,
doing like things that normal humans can't. So
yeah.
yeah, but from like following Lotus, like I think it's definitely impressive that you've obviously got all the character driven drama, but seeing like the CGI and all in the official trailer, like I was in shock at that moment actually.
The CGI team, Rigdon, Ben, Austin, and Justice, and then of course Max did the animation for the swing.
Mm.
They're all so talented, and that shot was only made in about a week. It's
Mm.
not representative of the final movie CGI.
Mm.
Max is actually working right now on the that shot in the trailer, the environment isn't for the movie. The environment will be different in the movie.
Mhm.
He's working on the final shot right now. He sent me some progress today. I'm like, wow, like they're so freaking talented. I can't believe it. Rigdon's model, the Spider-Man model,
Mhm.
I was shocked when he first showed me, how realistic it looks and how accurate it looks to the actual suit. And he, I've wanted for a long time to have a cloth simulation for the suit to stretch and move uh,
Mhm.
with the shot. And I don't think we could fully display that in the trailer, but in the final movie, we're going to have the suit sort of like ripple, and when he moves, it's gonna, it's sort of a baggy suit, so you can kind
Mhm.
of see it ripple and move with him. And Rigdon's found a brilliant way to do that with blending kind of keyframe um, cloth simulation to
Mhm.
make it look like the suit's moving and kind of add to the realism. So I'm very, very excited for people to see what the actual CGI will look like with the second trailer whenever that comes next year. I think
Yeah.
people will be pretty blown away by the work that these people are capable of doing, because they're so far beyond my expectation.
Mm. Well, that's very exciting to hear. Like my excitement for that is
Yeah.
increased by a tenfold now, I think.
Yeah.
Well, that's amazing. So obviously, like they're all working very hard to bring that aspect
Very
to
hard.
the
Yeah.
film.
They put so much on the line, and I'm
Mm.
forever grateful for it.
Mhm. Yeah. So this whole journey of creating Lotus, filming and putting everything together, like I feel like for me it's been a bit inspiring to me as well, because I've had this idea for like a Spider-Man series for a long time, but
Yeah.
never felt like I could be bothered to, to write it or anything. So but now I don't know, I've been starting to consider maybe writing a screenplay at least. So
Yeah, I think honestly, like writing anything, even if it's not going to be made into something official or real,
mhm,
I think writing a script in general, or just writing anything. Like I don't like before Spider-Man Lotus, I wrote like a 10 season long Spider-Man show.
mm,
It was like a pitch series. And that helped me so much for Lotus to understand Spider-Man. It's 10
mhm,
elaborate seasons that I collaborated with this guy, Ryan. He's Spidey Feet on Instagram.
mhm,
We pitched a 10 season long Spider-Man show. It lasted like 2.5 months on my page. And
wow,
of course, we are like, there's never going to be a real thing. It's never going to be made into a reality. But it benefited me in my writing skills, and it benefited me in storytelling in so many different ways, that I fully encourage writing. If you have an idea, just go ahead and write it and have it
mhm,
in your drafts, and have it in your back pocket. It'll benefit you, more than you think, because it'll really, really sharpen your skills for when you write something that you plan to actually make one day.
mhm. Okay, I'll bear that in mind.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like just the film in general, it's just going to be a huge encouragement to, upcoming filmmakers. Like
I hope
even if
so.
they are independent, like all of you are proving that it is possible,
Yeah,
and
I mean,
that's
I certainly hope so, that people can be inspired by this movie, and sort of start doing some more maybe character driven superhero stories that we've been a little absent of in recent years.
mhm, yeah. I think I've noticed some other individuals on Instagram who are making their own fan made films and I think a
Yeah,
series as well. So it's nice to see like more people
yeah, sort of
uh,
embracing their
going
creativity.
ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead and doing their own thing. So
Yeah, and I feel like once the film is out as well, like I don't know if you think this at all. If would it set like a standard for fan films at all?
um I don't know if, like, I don't want to say that my movie will, put any sort of standard or anything like that.
Hmm.
Because I think everybody's creation has their own merit to it, and I think, there have been
Hmm.
a lot of great fan films in the past that I've loved. And I think I don't think filmmaking should ever be competitive, and I know that a lot of people view filmmaking as a competitive field, which, and they can think that for sure. And of
Mm.
course, it's a competitive industry by nature. Um, but I think if you view it as a competition, you are going to not live a very fulfilled life, and you're going to be kind of constantly in the work mindset, and you're going to be kind of losing the merit in filmmaking in the first place. Um, so, I mean, a lot of people are going to view it as competitive, and that's the way it is. But I choose to, you know, not view it as that way. I want to. All I want to do is tell a story. And
Yeah.
put my ideas into reality, and I don't want to be competing with people to do that, because I think most movies should be made out of love for the idea. Being in love with an
Mhm.
idea and bringing it to life, and making it a reality, should be what kind of drives you, and passion should be what drives you. And if you let that love be infiltrated by a disdain for others, or a jealousy of others, or competitiveness, or anything like that,
Mhm.
uh, it becomes compromised. So I think maintaining that idea of just wanting to make something out of love, staying in that tunnel vision, not sort of letting anything else influence you, and then releasing it, is sort of the best way to think about it.
Mhm. Yeah, that's greatly put. Like, I was having a conversation earlier today actually about how in like, because I kind of do a little bit of art, so in these sort of creative communities, it seems like certain people or their styles are kind of elevated to just be like the standard, and this is what everyone should achieve. But
Yeah,
then that makes people struggle and feel like they're not good enough
exactly.
because they're not meeting that supposed standard, and that
Yeah.
shouldn't be the way it is. It should just be personal to you and because you want to do it and not because you have to do anything.
Yeah, exactly. And that is such like an interesting thing, because like, um I think if you have such a high standard that you can't reach, a lot of people halt themselves and they give up, because of the
Hmm.
fact that the standard's way too high, and it's like how they're wondering how they're going to reach that standard. And a lot of people quit, or they stop doing it because of the fact that they feel intimidated to do that. And
Hmm.
I don't think that you should ever put limits on art like that, and put these heights. And I think you should always be trying to live up to your own standards, but not anybody else's.
Hmm.
And I think people will follow. That's why, I made Lotus as a drama. And I don't think anybody was asking for a Spider-Man drama when I was making it, but I wasn't
Hmm.
considering what other people wanted. And I went into it, and I was like, okay, we're making an emotional drama Spider-Man movie. If you would like to fund the movie, then go ahead. We have a website. But a lot of people were like, well, why would we want to watch a Spider-Man movie without any action, or anything like that? Um,
Hmm.
it's like I didn't really, care about their complaints. I just wanted to make the movie that I wanted to make, and of course, people have caught on to it, and they've become interested in the prospect of a drama Spider-Man movie.
Hmm.
And that's sort of what I want some people to pick up or think of, is that you should never make something with the intent of trying to please other people. It should always be to
Hmm.
satisfy yourself, and other people will follow you if you're just following your own dream. So
Yeah, that's a great piece of advice. I think that will definitely encourage people who want to be creative and share
yeah, yeah.
something to the world, even if it's just to a few people. It doesn't matter, like whatever, like an
All I care
individual.
about is, yeah, one person. That's all.
Yeah.
Like if I make a movie, if one person is sort of inspired by it or changed
Hmm.
by it, that's all I need. I don't care how many people it reaches, but if there's at least one person, then I'll feel like I've done something important uh, with my creation.
Hmm. Yeah, amazing. So I'm I've said this so many times already, but obviously I'm very, very excited for the film. And I hope that you and the rest of the crew and the cast are all proud, because you've all clearly worked very hard
Of course,
and
yeah.
it's
I
all
mean,
coming
I'm
to.
forever proud of it. I'm proud of their
Mhm.
work. I'm proud of what they've done. And I couldn't be more appreciative of everything that they did for me on the movie, and everything like that.
Mhm. Yeah. And I guess the final thing I just wanted to ask, a bit more of a general question, but do you have a favorite film or films that also inspired you to get into
Um,
filmmaking?
Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind is definitely my favorite movie of all time.
Mhm.
I watched it going into my junior year, and it was one of those first kind of not art house films, but
Mhm.
non superhero films that I watched, one of the first ones, and that I was engaged in. And it's such a compelling story, such a beautiful and realistic interpretation of love, and very nuanced interpretation of it. And it talks about, you can't ever push away or forget the negatives of life, and those negatives sort of shape you. And if you try to erase those or push those away, you're going to lose parts of yourself.
Mm.
And I think that the movie is just so beautiful, and the way it's shot, the way it's executed, the music, everything. Jim Carrey, the whole movie. Just I can go about it forever. And I've watched it so many different times. I'm probably gonna watch it again this week because it's so damn.
Yeah.
But that's definitely my favorite movie ever made.
Mm. I think I've seen you post about it a few times, so I was like, yeah,
Yeah,
this must be his favorite film.
yeah,
Yeah. And it sounds like as well, like the core of that movie can be found in Lotus as well.
yep, exactly. Yeah, trying to allowing those moments to shape you that you may look back on with regret.
Mhm.
They shape you regardless of whether you're willing to acknowledge it or not. They're always going to be part of you. So definitely, I think a lot of the elements of that movie ingrain themselves in Lotus.
Mhm. Eh, Yeah, so honestly, well done on the film and everything that's to come. Like,
Mhm.
yeah, everyone's excited. And like, yeah, I can't even put into words how excited I actually am, because this, I think, is really a gift to all Spider-Man fans and filmmakers alike.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate it. I mean, we really put our all into it, and I'm glad that the work is finally paying off, and we're able to see, everything that we put into it being realized by people and recognized by people. So I really appreciate it.
Mhm. Yeah, you're welcome. And it's been an honor to speak to you today about the film and everything else that's influenced you and the film.
Of course, and they're great questions, and it was a great interview. Um, I really appreciate you for having me on, and allowing me to talk to you about the movie and everything.
Yeah, no worries. This is my first time, so doing
Yeah, of
anything like this, so I'm glad
course,
to
you did a
hear.
great job.
Thanks. Yeah, so I guess that should wrap up today's interview, I guess. You can tell this is my first time.
That's no problem.
And yeah, like if you watched all of this, thank you for watching, and maybe see you again next time. Oh, right.